Welcome to Watches with Dennis, and today we're going to continue our examination of watch pricing with a focus on Omega. While Omega does have a lot of reference numbers in production at any given point in time, broadly speaking, their watches fall into four main categories: the Speedmaster series, the Seamaster series, the Constellation series, and the Ville series. So what I have done is I've taken one watch from each one of those series and I've decided to examine it in terms of its pricing performance over the last 6 months. All of these Omega watches are currently in production. So let's start with the Omega Speedmaster, and for this I chose the Professional Moonwatch reference number 310304250010001. As you can see from the graph, there has not been a lot of change, but a slight downward trending really since the latter portion of April. On these videos, incidentally, I've had mixed feedback in the sense that some people do not like it if I provide a graph that does not have a $0 amount at the y-axis because they find it misleading. But on the other hand, I do have complaints also when I use the $0 for the y-axis because it's very, very hard to see the minute changes in the trending because we're so far zoomed out on these multi-$1,000 watches. So I've decided to do a why not both and provide both instances. So we've been looking at the 0 y-axis version of this graph, but for the rest of the discussion, I want to go ahead and zoom in. So now our y-axis really spans $5,300 to $5,900, so you can better see what's been going on. And we're talking fairly small dollar amounts here in terms of change, but this version of the Moonwatch started the examination period, which was in early December 2021 at $5,831. It reached its peak amount on January 8th, 2022, and that was $5,860, and its current price as of June 5th, 2022 is $5,611. Now, this is a watch that retails for $6,300. So in terms of current pricing, the watch is 4.2% lower than what the peak price was in the 6-month period. It's 3.8% lower than the start of the 6-month examination period, and the current price is 10.9% lower than what this watch retails for. So let's jump to the Seamaster line, which I think is fair to say is the second most popular line of Omega watches, second to the Speedmaster. And in this instance, I've gone with the Omega Seamaster Diver 300M. The reference number is 210 30 42 20 03 001. Now, as you can see on this graph, we're basically at the price that we were at the start of the 6-month period. This was a watch that did see some very minor price increases early on in 2022, really peaking out around March and then falling since that point, essentially back to where we were. So let's go ahead and let's zoom in on the graph using a $4,000 y-axis as our floor rather than the $0 y-axis, and let's discuss in a bit more detail. So this version of the Seamaster was $4,251 back at the start of December. It peaked on March 8th, 2022 at $4,499, and its current June 5th price is $4,259. Now, this watch has fallen 5.3% versus its peak value in the 6-month period. However, it is 0.2% higher than the actual starting value of the watch. Now, that's essentially nothing. And incidentally, this is the only watch of the four that we're looking at that has a higher price right now than it was at the start of the 6-month period. But again, the change is minute. Now, more significant than the change from the Speedmaster, this watch is 21.1% lower on current pricing than what it retails for new. So let's move to Omega number 3. This will be one of the Constellation watches. And for this, I chose to go with the Globemaster, reference number 130 30 39 21 03 001. As we can see from this graph, the trending downward is much more pronounced than we really saw on the other two watches, though it did have a brief period where it was going up in the examination period. So let's go ahead and zoom in. We'll use a $4,400 floor for this y-axis on the zoom so you can better see what I'm talking about. And as this visualization represents, this watch started the 6-month period at $4,992. It reached peak pricing on February 8th at $5,087, and its current price is $4,671. So this watch has fallen 8.2% from its peak price in the 6-month period. It's fallen 6.4% since the start of the 6-month period, And this watch, quite significantly, is 35.1% lower now on the secondhand market than it sells for retail. And finally, we will take a look at a watch from the DeVille line. This is the Prestige Coaxial 39.5, and the reference number is 424 13 40 20 02 001. You've just got to love these reference numbers with Omega. Now, looking at the graph with the $0 y-axis, you can see very similar to what we saw with the Constellation. It's a much more pronounced drop downward, easier to see on this graph than we saw with the Seamaster and the Speedmaster. So let's go ahead and zoom in. We'll be using a smaller floor for this watch because this watch trades a lot less. The floor will be $2,200, as you can see on the graph. I chose this watch because there's actually an article I saw on Hodinkee which brought up this model, stating that this is the most inexpensive way to get into a coaxial movement from Omega. And the pricing bears that out. This watch started my examination period at $2,451. All other snapshot price points are lower than the start of the examination period, though you can see on the zoomed in graph that there have been points where it's gone up a little bit versus where it was in preceding weeks. The current pricing on this Prestige is $2,284, so it's down from the start and the peak by 6.8%, but compared to the retail price of $3,750, you can get this secondhand for 39.1% less. So let me go ahead and show you the graph with all four of these watches represented. The Speedmaster is in blue, the Seamaster is in orange, the Constellation Globemaster is in gray, and the DeVille Prestige is in yellow. And you can see the starting price points at the 6-month period, and you can see the ending price points that we are currently at as of June 5th. Now, as a reminder, because I don't have graphed on here the retail prices, because that's not really a part of the chart, the Speedmaster retails for $6,300. The Seamaster retails for $5,400. The Constellation retails for $7,200, so that's the most expensive watch I have of the four at retail. And the DeVille Prestige retails for $3,750, which is our cheapest retail value watch that we're examining here from Omega. Now, in terms of trending, these charts are not particularly interesting in my opinion. They're all down a little bit except for the Seamaster 300M, but we're talking about a watch that is selling currently for less than $10 more than it was back at the start of December. So that one stayed relatively flat. You can see the lower pricing now versus before on all the other watches, though how easy that is to see. It depends on the particular model. The Speedmaster being the most difficult one really to visualize, but that's not particularly surprising given that it's not even 4% cheaper now than it was at the start of the examination period. In fact, Seamaster aside, of course, the Speedmaster, Constellation, and DeVille have only gone down by single-digit percentages, none exceeding 7% from the starting value. But all four of these Omega watches are non-hype watches. I would say that the Speedmaster Professional Moonwatch and the Seamaster Diver 300M are very popular watches, but Omega makes a lot of them. And I think we can really easily measure the fact that these are not hype watches by the fact that at no point in these examination periods were these watches trading for more used than they retail for. And when we consider the two less popular watches, the Constellation Globemaster and the DeVille Prestige, they are down very, very significantly from what they retail at. With the Constellation currently over 35% less than it retails for, and the DeVille almost 40% less. So, at least in the context of these four watches I've chosen, if you've been considering just wanting to get into Omega because you're interested in the brand or interested in the technology, the Constellation and the DeVille are very interesting watches to consider. In fact, I would point out, because it's easy to lose track of given we don't have the retail prices on this chart, but that Constellation Globemaster, while it is the most expensive retail priced watch of the four we're looking at, you can see on this chart it is significantly less secondhand than what the Speedmaster Professional trades for. And that's because that Moonwatch is a very popular watch, and so there's just not a lot of discounting available because, again, in my opinion, it is the most popular line of all of the Omegas. But while Seamaster aside, we have seen some slight dips on these, we're not seeing the same thing that we're seeing in terms of market relationship and what's been happening with the hype watches. These watches have been, by and large, relatively stable. None of them have fallen off even 10% from where they were 6 months ago. And so in this sense, these Omegas don't seem to be particularly impacted by what else is going on in the watch industry and in the broader markets, at least currently. Yes, down a little bit versus what we saw at the start of the year, but again, it's just a little bit. So that concludes this video. Please let me know what you think, or if you have any other watches you'd like me to take a look at in terms of their price performance, and I'll put those down for consideration on a future video. If you enjoyed this, please give it a like. It helps the channel out. And otherwise, I will talk to you all again soon. Take care, everybody.